Ethan McCrae folded his son's favorite blue blanket one more time before placing it gently into the cedar trunk by the front door. The wood groaned a little, just like his heart, but it stayed shut, holding the last softness of a life he could no longer touch. The house was too quiet, and not the comforting kind. The air was thick with stillness, the kind that used to echo with Lego pieces being snapped together and small feet running into walls. The kind that still remembered lullabies, whispered in doorways. The kind that clung to a single coffee mug left in the sink for days. Because it was the last one he made for the little boy who used to call him Dad in two-syllable bursts. 6 years ago, Ethan buried his wife. 3 years ago, he lost their son to leukemia. Now, at 42, he lived in a house with too many bedrooms and a heart that had learned to beat around the hollow. He was a carpenter by trade. Steady hands, honest days. Wood never talked back. It just listened. Let him sand it down and shape it into something useful. He hadn't built anything for himself in years, until the ad. It came in the mail, tucked between an oil change coupon and a notice for overdue property tax. A glossy pamphlet. Corny, outdated. Probably illegal in half the states. Looking for love, legacy, and loyalty. Welcome to Hearts Across Horizons. International companionship services for strong, kind men with gentle intentions. He almost threw it out. Almost. But that night, after one too many microwave dinners and scrolling through photos of people with lives, Ethan opened it again. He didn't want romance. He wanted noise. He wanted a kitchen full of clinking glasses. He wanted a reason to fix the swing on the porch again. He wanted life. He filled out the form like it was an order sheet from Home Depot. Name, Ethan McCrae. Profession, carpenter. Children, 1, deceased. Looking for a kind woman. Honest. Loves family. Doesn't mind messes. Open to marriage. Real. No games. Please be real. He didn't expect anything, which is why the letter caught him off guard. A month later, it arrived. Neatly handwritten. Ink smudged in places, like the writer had cried while finishing it. Dear Ethan, I know this is strange. I wasn't looking for this, either. But maybe that's how good things find us, when we aren't looking anymore. My name is Mila. I am 35. I live in the Philippines with my 7 children. Yes, 7. They are not mistakes. They are my heartbeat. If you truly want a family, I am one. A loud, imperfect, grateful one. Ethan stared at the letter for a long time. Then he read it again, and again. Not because he was sure, but because something in her handwriting made the house feel less cold. 2 months later, he cleaned out the guest rooms. 3 weeks after that, he ordered a used van off Craigslist. Then he waited, and on a cloudy Tuesday morning, after triple-checking the doorbell worked, he opened the front door and saw a woman in a lavender dress holding a suitcase in one hand and a toddler in the other. Behind her, a tangle of children, some curious, some shy, one asleep standing up. Mila stepped forward and said quietly, with an accent soft as sea foam, I hope you don't mind. We brought everything. Ethan blinked. Everything? 7 kids. 1 woman, 3 bags. A whole life. On his porch, and all he could say was, "I've got waffles." And a lot of rooms. Mila smiled. So did the littlest boy. And with that, the quiet house began to breathe again. The hallway light flickered as the last child stepped across the threshold. Mila gently nudged her youngest, a girl of about 4, into the warmth of the entryway. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, like someone who'd accidentally ordered one chair and received an entire orchestra. The air filled quickly with the shuffling of shoes, the cautious glance of little eyes, and the creaking floor groaning under the weight of sudden life. He cleared his throat. "I didn't think you'd all be so ready." Mila tilted her head. "We were already packed before your letter came." That sentence hung in the air like something heavier than luggage. Ethan offered a small nod. "Let me show you the rooms." There had once been laughter in the corners of this house, but it had learned to shrink itself, to live in forgotten cabinets and dust-covered picture frames. Now, it had to make space for something entirely new. The tour was simple. 3 bedrooms upstairs, 1 downstairs. 1 old office. Ethan opened the first door and apologized for the pale yellow paint. "It used to be my son's room. Haven't changed it." Mila looked inside quietly. "We'll leave that one as it is. No questions, no pressure, just respect." The children were polite. Too polite, really. Lined up like new students waiting. To be sorted, Ethan tried to learn their names, failed halfway through, and started calling them Buddy, Little Miss, and Sweetheart. Mila gently corrected him. "Start with Ruthie. She's the oldest." A teenage girl in a hand-me-down hoodie nodded once. She was tall, watchful. "And that's Jojo, the loud one." Jojo grinned, already tugging open a cereal box like he lived. "There. The others? Thomas, Lucia, Bea, Carlo, and baby May." Ethan mentally tried counting shoes, cups, chairs. He didn't have enough of anything. "I'll make a grocery run tomorrow," he said aloud, mostly to himself. Mila smiled. "We are used to less. But thank you." He opened the fridge. 3 eggs, half a jug of milk. Mustard. Yep, definitely. A grocery run. That night, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, staring at a tiny slipper someone had left in the hallway. He could hear them downstairs. Barely. A muffled bedtime story. A soft lullaby in a language he didn't know. The sound of blankets being tucked with care. The sounds of a woman who had done this before, who had kept a boat of children afloat without a harbor. He hadn't known how empty his life had become, until now. Not just lonely, empty. He rose quietly, walked to the attic, and pulled down the box marked Kyle. Inside were things that hadn't been touched in years. Train tracks, comic books, a broken flashlight he swore he'd fix. He carried the box downstairs. Mila was folding towels on the couch. She looked up, surprised. "These were my boys," Ethan said, placing the box on the floor. "I want your kids to have them." She pressed her hand to her chest. "Are you sure?" Ethan hesitated. "No, but I think he would be." She walked over, lifted a tiny red truck from the box, and whispered, "Thank you." In that moment, Ethan realized he hadn't just opened a door. He'd let go of something he'd been gripping too tight, and for the first time in years, the house didn't echo emptiness back at him. It echoed possibility. Ethan woke up to the unmistakable sound of laughter. Not just one voice, but many. High, light, tumbling voices echoing down the hallway like wind chimes in spring. He blinked hard. It was early. Too early. He reached for his alarm, only to find it had already gone off and stopped. Apparently, Jojo thought pressing buttons was a universal language. Downstairs, the smell of something burning filled the air. He bolted. In the kitchen, chaos looked beautiful. Lucia stood on a stool trying to flip a pancake with a spatula twice her size. Bea had syrup on her elbow. Carlo was stirring orange juice with a wooden spoon. Jojo had cracked an egg directly onto the counter and was drawing a smiley face in the yolk. Mila turned from the stove, apron tied clumsily, a streak of flour across her cheek. Ethan took it all in, and then smiled. Looks like the health department's gonna shut me down. Mila laughed, her eyes crinkling. Only if they hate joy. He stepped in, took the spatula, and flipped the next pancake like a pro. Lucia gasped. Whoa, you're a chef, Ethan winked. Nah, just a dad. After breakfast, they cleaned up. Jojo washed dishes like he was in a car wash. Ruthie swept with quiet focus. Even baby May toddled around with a sock on her hand, dusting the floor. Ethan didn't say it out loud, but he felt it. They were becoming something. Not guests, not visitors, but inhabitants. Of space, of moments, of his once still heart. Later, that day, a storm rolled in, quick and loud. Rain pounded the windows. Thunder rattled the walls. The power flickered and died. Lucia screamed. Jojo yelled, "Cool!" Bea cried. Mila lit candles in the living room. Her movements were steady. Practiced. We do this back home all the time, she said calmly. Come, sit close. She placed a candle in the center of the coffee table and took out a stack of colored paper from her bag. We're going to make heart chains. One for every kindness today, Bea sniffled. I helped Ruthie find her shoe, Lucia added. Jojo gave me the bigger pancake. Jojo grinned proudly. Ethan paused, then offered, I remembered how to smile. Mila's eyes met his, soft, warm. That's the biggest kindness of all. They spent the next hour cutting and folding, hearts everywhere, taped to the walls, the door frames, the fridge. The house looked like Valentine's Day exploded, and somehow Ethan didn't mind. When the lights finally blinked back on, no one even noticed, because by then the real light had come from something deeper, a feeling Ethan hadn't had in years. This is what love sounds like when it has many voices. That night, after everyone was asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table. The box of Kyle's things sat open beside him. He pulled out an old drawing, a house with stick figures holding hands, one labeled Dad, one labeled Me, and one with a question mark. He smiled bitterly. Kyle always wanted siblings. He just never lived long enough to have them, and yet, now, they were here. Maybe not by blood, but perhaps love didn't need biology. just a place to grow, and maybe this was it. Ethan stood in the garage, staring at the old dining table he'd meant to fix for years. Its leg was loose, one of the corners chipped. The wood, a bit warped from weather and neglect, had once hosted Thanksgiving dinners and birthday cakes. But now it stood in silence, much like the man who owned it. He ran his hand over its surface. It deserved better. So did they. The door creaked open. Mila stood there, arms folded gently across her chest, her eyes soft. "You work too much," she said. He turned, dust on his shirt, sawdust in his hair. "I haven't even started." "You think because you give us walls and rooms, that's what we need most." He raised an eyebrow. "Isn't it?" She stepped forward. "The rooms help, but they're not what we carry with us." Ethan didn't answer, but her words stayed with him. Later that afternoon, Ethan took the kids on a hardware store trip. It was supposed to be 10 minutes. It turned into 2 hours. Lucia insisted they needed rainbow paints. Jojo campaigned for a drill just my size. Bee grabbed every keychain in the checkout aisle. Baby May somehow ended up holding an entire tape measure and refused to let go. By the end, Ethan looked like a man who had just survived a mini tornado, but he was smiling. Back home, they repainted the table. It became a mural of tiny handprints, streaks of orange and green, names scribbled in permanent marker. It wasn't neat, but it was alive. That night, while Mila put the kids to bed, Ethan stood at the doorway to the living room, watching. He heard the way Ruthie whispered when she thought no one could hear. "Do you think he'll keep us?" It hit him like a hammer to the chest. The way she asked it, not with anger, not even fear, just resignation, as if she'd already lived through too many answers that meant no. He stepped back before she saw him. Later, when Mila returned to the kitchen, Ethan was pouring 2 mugs of tea. "I heard Ruthie," he said quietly. Mila nodded. She's always been the one who counts exit doors, just in case. He stirred his tea, watching the swirl settle. "I haven't said it, because I wasn't sure what it meant," he said slowly. "But I don't want you to leave." Mila looked at him, not surprised, just waiting. "You don't have to promise forever," she said. "Just promise breakfast, and after that, we'll see." He looked up, then smiled. "I can do breakfast." That night, the storm returned. Not outside, but in Ethan's dreams. He saw Kyle standing in the backyard under the apple tree. The boy was holding a paper heart. The wind kept trying to take it, but he held on. Ethan called out to him, but Kyle just smiled and whispered, "Make room." Then he was gone. Ethan woke up, breath caught in his throat. The house was quiet again, but this time, not alone. He reached for the mug Mila had left on the nightstand, still warm, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel like something was missing. He felt like something was becoming. Saturday mornings used to be quiet. Ethan's version of adventure was strong coffee, fixing leaky faucets, and maybe, browsing the lumber aisle at Home Depot like it was a museum. But this Saturday, there were 3 kids arguing over cereal. In aisle 5, one asking for glitter glue in aisle 10. and a toddler screaming "potato" at a display of oranges. Ethan didn't know whether to laugh or run. "Why do we need 5 loaves of bread?" he asked Mila as she checked items off her folded list. She glanced up, amused. "Because Jojo eats like he's training for a wrestling match, Ruthie packs 2 sandwiches for school, and Lucia likes to feed the birds, which is code for dropping half outside." Ethan chuckled. This was chaos. It was also kind of perfect. Back home, Ruthie hovered near the mailbox. She'd been waiting on something, though she hadn't said what. Ethan handed her the key without asking. She returned minutes later, holding an envelope with no return address. She didn't open it, just put it in her pocket. "Thanks," she said, not looking at him. That night, Ethan mentioned it to Mila. "She writes to her birth father sometimes," Mila explained, drying plates. "But he never writes back." Ethan paused. "She's tough, you know, but even iron gets tired." He nodded, quietly folding the towel in his hands. "She ever talk about it?" "Only when it hurts." That evening, Ethan sat on the porch, while Jojo zoomed by on a scooter that looked like it had survived 2 world wars. "I'm fast!" Jojo shouted. "You're dangerous!" Ethan shouted back. Jojo grinned and zipped off again. Mila joined him with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, I just—" He exhaled. "There are so many versions of me that couldn't have done this." She looked at him carefully. "And this version? I still don't know what I'm doing." "You don't have to," she said, sipping her cocoa. "You just have to stay." That word hung in the air like music. Stay. Not fix. Not rescue. Not even save. Just stay. That night, Ethan passed by the living room and noticed something new. The mural table now had a sticky note attached to it. In a child's handwriting, it read, "This is the family table." He blinked. His throat tightened. He took a photo of it, just in case it ever got smudged, torn, or forgotten. The next morning, Ruthie left the envelope on the table. Opened, empty, and, on the back, scribbled in the same pencil, she had written, "Maybe it's okay. Maybe this is the answer." Ethan stared at the words. He didn't ask her about it. He just made her favorite breakfast, peanut butter waffles with banana slices, and set it on the table with no comment. She sat beside him and ate in silence, but she stayed the whole time. Later, that day, Mila caught him sanding a piece of wood on the back porch. "What are you making?" she asked. He looked up and smiled. "A bench. For the front porch." "For sitting?" "For waiting," he replied. "For whatever comes next." She stepped closer, brushing sawdust off his shirt. "Do you ever think this could be permanent?" she asked. Ethan looked at the sky, then at the mess of toys in the yard, at the mural table, the empty envelope, the new grocery list with 6 loaves this time. He nodded. "Yeah, I do." And Mila, who had crossed an ocean with 7 children and "nothing guaranteed," whispered, "Then let's build it. Together." It was finished. Ethan stepped back and looked at the bench he had sanded, stained, and built with hands that used to tremble when faced with anything resembling permanence. It sat on the porch, like a promise, wide enough for 3 kids and a parent, strong enough for weight, that wasn't just physical. Ruthie was the first to try it. She sat quietly, running her fingers over the grain of the wood. "You built this?" "Yeah." "Why?" He smiled. "Because sometimes people need somewhere to rest, without asking for it." She didn't say anything, but she didn't get up either. A week later, Mila approached Ethan with a quiet urgency in her voice. "Lucia's birthday is this Saturday." Ethan blinked. "Already?" "She didn't want to tell you," Mila added, folding laundry. "She didn't want to be disappointed." Something sharp cut through his chest. So he planned. Not big, just right. Streamers from the dollar store. Balloons he let the kids blow up and tie off, badly. A cake with more icing than structure. And one piñata that looked more like a deflated potato than a unicorn. Lucia cried when she saw it. Not because it was bad, but because it was hers, her. Name was spelled wrong on the cake. She didn't care. She said, "It's the first one that had my name at all." Jojo sang too loud. B spilled punch. Tomas fell asleep mid-sugar high. Carlo gave Lucia a rock as a gift and said, "It's a lucky one." Lucia tucked it in her pocket like a gem. Later, Mila found Ethan standing by the sink, hands wet, eyes glassy. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded, then shook his head. I never knew something so small could feel so big." She touched his arm. "This is what love looks like when it's learning to walk again." Then came the call. Mila stepped out to answer it, frowning the way people do when the voice on the other end is already a storm. When she returned, Ethan was tying garbage bags full of streamers. Her face was pale. "Back home," she said, softly. "My mother, she's sick. I need to go." Ethan straightened. "Of course, we'll make a plan." She hesitated. "The kids, they'll stay here. For now." He blinked. "With me?" She nodded. "Unless that's too much." He looked toward the living room where Jojo was building a fort out of couch cushions, and Ruthie was reading a story to Bee and baby May on the mural table bench. "No," he said. "It's not too much. It's just more than I thought I could ever have." The next morning, Mila packed light. The kids hugged her like magnets. Clinging to a fridge, she bent down to baby May and whispered something in Tagalog. The toddler nodded like she understood. Then she turned to Ethan. "I don't know how long," she said. "I'll be here," he replied. She paused, her hands lingering on his sleeves. "Promise?" He didn't flinch. Breakfast. Every day. Then she was gone, and Ethan stood at the door, a child in each hand, watching the taxi disappear down the road. He wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Because when a house becomes a home, even goodbyes feel like waiting rooms. The first morning without Mila felt like a test, and Ethan wasn't sure he had studied. He got up before dawn, tied on an apron that still smelled faintly of sawdust and syrup, and stared down a carton of eggs like it had insulted him. He cracked 4 into a bowl, scrambled, burned them slightly, then tried again. Jojo entered the kitchen in a superhero cape and nothing else. "Where's Mom?" Ethan knelt. "She had to go help your grandma, but I'm here." Jojo frowned. "But you don't know how to make rice right." Ethan grinned. "Want to teach me?" Jojo beamed. Lesson 1. Rinse twice. Lesson 2. Don't stir while it cooks. Lesson 3. Always wait, like really wait, before opening the lid. They stood side by side, watching the pot like it held treasure. By mid-morning, the house was buzzing. Tomas needed help with a glue project that stuck everything except the paper. Lucia had a spelling test online and cried when the internet glitched. Ruthie needed to be dropped off at the library for her volunteer shift. Carlo broke a mug and apologized 10 times. Bea dressed baby May in a tutu and rain boots, declaring, "It her business outfit." Ethan took it all in, one breath at a time. At lunchtime, Jojo leaned across the table, syrup in his hair. "You're better at pancakes now." Ethan winked. "I had a good coach." Then the fire alarm blared. Lucia's rice experiment went wrong, very wrong. Smoke billowed. Screams followed. Jojo yelled, "Fire!" while waving a towel like he was at a concert. Ethan grabbed the pan, opened the window, fanned the smoke, and somehow laughed. He was laughing. Through chaos, through noise, through burned rice. He laughed. Later that evening, after bath time, became a water park, and everyone had finally quieted down. Ruthie stood in the hallway. She held an envelope. "Can I ask you something?" she whispered. "Always." She bit her lip. "If I wrote to someone new, would that be weird?" Ethan shook his head. "Depends who." She hesitated, then whispered, "You." Ethan's throat tightened. She handed him the envelope. No stamp, no address, just "To Ethan" in her careful cursive. He opened it slowly. Inside, a single line. "You don't have to be my dad, but if you wanted to be, that'd be okay." Ethan looked up. His voice cracked. "Ruthie." She stepped back. "You don't have to answer now." "I already did." She smiled. Just barely. And for the first time, her shoulders relaxed like someone who no longer had to count exit doors. That night, Ethan sat at the porch bench, baby May asleep against his chest. The stars were unusually bright. The wind moved gently, like it didn't want to wake the house. He thought about Mila, her laughter in the kitchen, her grace under pressure, the way she always looked like she belonged, even in a country that had never welcomed her properly. He missed her deeply. But he wasn't broken. He was blooming, and he didn't know it yet. But she'd be back soon, with news that would change everything. It had been 12 days since Mila left, the kind of days that stretch, not in length, but in depth, each one layering something new onto Ethan's chest. Joy, worry, closeness, fatigue. It was a beautiful kind of ache. And every night, he left. The porch light on, just in case. Saturday morning arrived with sunlight slicing through the blinds, crisp and golden. The house stirred slowly. Bea curled against the living room cushion like a kitten. Jojo snored loudly under a blanket tent labeled NASA. Lucia was already sketching galaxies on the back of a cereal box. Ethan wandered out to get the mail. Mostly junk, a bill, a postcard for a dentist, and then an envelope. Thin, cream-colored, foreign stamp, his name in perfect script. He didn't open it right away. He held it like it might break. Inside, Mila's handwriting wrapped around him like a voice. "Ethan, I think my mother is holding on just long enough to say goodbye. She knows. I know." Grief sits differently here. It isn't heavy. It floats between stories and prayers. But even still, I miss you. I miss the table, the chaos, the wrong rice. I dreamt last night that we were all sitting on the porch bench, and you were humming something, and I couldn't quite place it. But the kids knew every word. Tell Ruthie I'm proud of her. And tell Jojo he still owes me a proper pancake. I'll be home soon. Methan folded the letter and tucked it into his shirt pocket, like it was keeping his heart warm. Later that day, while Bee napped and Lucia helped Ethan with laundry, he paused outside the door to the downstairs room. Mila's room. The door was still open. Her scarf hung where she left. It undraped over the edge of the chair. Her scent still lingered, faint and floral. A half-used lip balm. A comb with strands of dark hair. A book of poems in Tagalog and English, still marked at page 72. He sat on the edge of her bed, quietly. He didn't touch anything. He just breathed. Let the quiet do its work. Let the space speak. Let her presence still live in the things she left behind. That night, Ruthie knocked on his door. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You already did," he teased gently. She grinned a little. "Different thing." He nodded. "What happens when you love someone who might not come back?" Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then answered carefully. "Then you love them where they are, and when they come back, you're still here. Same porch, same bench. Light on." She nodded slowly, then whispered, "You're really good at this." "At what?" "Being the kind of safe that doesn't need words." Ethan's throat tightened. He hugged her, and for the first time, she didn't pull away. Later, he turned off all the lights, except the porch. Still on, still waiting, still glowing, like hope in a frame. And in that light, Ethan realized, you don't need certainty to love someone. You just need the willingness to keep the door open. Time didn't pass the same after Mila left. It didn't run. It didn't crawl. It simply stood, like a polite stranger in the corner, watching Ethan fill each moment with effort and heart. He had learned to braid Bee's hair badly. He now knew which spoon Jojo insisted on using, the blue one with the bite mark. He had memorized which bedtime story Ruthie requested when she missed Mila, but didn't want to admit it. Each night, he checked the porch light. Each morning, he made breakfast, and in the middle of all of it, life quietly bloomed. It was a Thursday when Ethan received a message, a video message. Lucia opened it first on his phone. Mila's face filled the screen, tired but smiling. She wore a scarf, her eyes rimmed in soft grief. "Mama passed peacefully," she said. "She was ready, and I held her hand the whole time. Thank you for holding things there while I held things here." She paused, voice trembling just slightly. "Tell them I'll be on the next flight." The kids didn't cheer. They just stood, in awe. It was like the sun promised to rise early the next day. Ethan took the kids out that afternoon. Not for ice cream, not for toys, but to the garden center. We're planting something, he said. Lucia asked. What kind? He held up a pack of marigold seeds. Hope, he said. They dug with plastic spoons and measuring cups. Dirt under their nails, sun on their backs. Tomas patted the earth like it was a pillow. Jojo yelled, I found a worm! Like it was gold. They planted in silence, watered gently, and left the porch light on. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He walked the house, checked the locks, adjusted blankets, watched over them like a lighthouse keeper. In the kitchen, he made tea. The silence felt soft. But then, something shifted. A shadow, a motion. He moved to the window. There, on the porch, Mila. She was standing there, suitcase beside her, hand lifted mid-knock. Ethan opened the door before she could. They stared at each other. Then she whispered, Did I miss breakfast? He shook his head, smiling. You're right on time. And for the first time since she left, he stepped aside, and she stepped in. The kids woke to the sound of laughter. Real, warm, tear-stained laughter. And when they came rushing down the hall, colliding into Mila with hugs, the house itself seemed to breathe again, like it had been holding its breath all along. That evening, Mila sat on the porch bench beside Ethan. She noticed the tiny sprout pushing through the dirt. Marigolds, she asked. Hope, he said. She leaned her head on his shoulder. You kept the room open. He nodded. You left your light on in us. And together, they watched the stars rise. One by one, quiet miracles. Just like the family they'd built. Imperfect, unlikely, rooted in something real. A week after Mila returned, the porch bench broke. Not dramatically, not loudly. Just a soft crack beneath the weight of 3 kids piled on top of each other during a chaotic game of Guess What I'm Thinking. Jojo hit the ground first and wailed like he'd fallen off a cliff. Ruthie screamed, not in pain, but from surprise. Bea declared, It's okay, I'll fix it, and promptly sat on the broken part. Ethan ran out, heart racing. When he saw the mess, he laughed. I knew I should have used better wood glue. The bench was just wood. But it had become a symbol, and sometimes even symbols break under love that grows too fast to measure. That night, Ethan stood with a flashlight and sandpaper. Mila came outside, carrying 2 mugs of ginger tea. You and I don't have to fix it tonight, she said. I know, but you are. He looked at her, light catching the edge of her hair. I built it before I knew what I was building for. Now, I want it to last. She sat beside him on the edge of the porch. You can always build a new one. I want to build a better one. Inside, the kids were asleep. Jojo curled around a stuffed bear that didn't belong to him. Lucia's galaxy sketches were taped to the bedroom wall. Ruthie had tucked her letter, the one to Ethan, under her pillow. Mila watched from the doorway. This was never supposed to be permanent, she whispered. Ethan didn't look up. But it is now? She didn't answer immediately, then softly, yes. The next day, they took the kids to a local art fair. Carlo painted his face blue and refused to wipe it off. Tomas ate too much popcorn and threw up behind the cotton candy stand. Bee begged Mila for glitter earrings, then fell asleep mid-plea. But Ruthie, she wandered off. When they found her, she was sitting beneath a tree, reading aloud to a child in a wheelchair. The child didn't speak, just smiled. Ethan watched from a distance. "She's more than anyone's ever let her be," he murmured. Mila stood beside him. "She's who I was at her age, quiet, hopeful, afraid to ask for more." Ethan looked at her. "She's not afraid anymore." Mila squeezed his hand. "Neither am I." Later that night, as stars began to gather, Ethan brought out a sketchbook. "I've been designing something," he said. Mila raised an eyebrow. "A new bench?" she teased. He shook his head, flipping the pages. Drawings, floor plans, a big table, a reading nook, a sunroom. He looked at her. "I want to build a house, not just live in one. For all of us. Together." She stared at the sketchbook, then up at him. "You sure?" He took her hand. "I've never been more sure of anything." She smiled, eyes full of something deeper than just joy. It was belief, the kind that grows when love roots itself into ordinary things, like porch lights, breakfasts, and a family with space enough for everyone. It was a rainy Tuesday when Ruthie asked. They had just finished dinner. Rice, grilled vegetables, and chicken thighs Ethan had overcooked, but no one complained. Jojo was making syrup rivers on his plate. Bee had fallen asleep with her fork in midair, and Lucia was humming a lullaby into Baby May's ear. Then Ruthie stood, clutching her book like a shield. She looked directly at Ethan. "Can I take your last name?" The room went still. Mila's fork dropped softly to her plate. Ethan looked at her, then at Ruthie. His voice broke before it formed. "What?" Ruthie stepped closer. "You don't have to say yes," she said quickly. I don't want to be someone else's anymore. I want to belong here. Really, here." He stood, walked around the table. Kneeling, he reached out, hands not to hold, but to offer. "You already do." She blinked, hard. Then, "Can I be Ruthie Carter?" Ethan smiled. "You can be anything you want. But yes, you can." Later that night, after the house went quiet, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed. Mila entered, holding a steaming mug of tea. "She's never asked for that before," she whispered. "I didn't know I could cry this quietly," he replied, with a laugh that wasn't really a laugh. Mila sat beside him. "She's testing the world," she said, checking if it holds when she presses. Ethan nodded. "Then we hold." Mila looked at him. "You do, every day." The next morning, Ruthie brought a sticky note to the kitchen. It said, "To do, ask about name change, eat pancakes, try to, smile more." Ethan stuck it to the fridge and circled number 3. Then added, "Or, build new bench. 5. Hug Ruthie, daily." She grinned when she saw it. No words, just that grin. It said everything. Over the next few days, the family shifted again. Lucia began teaching Bee how to draw stars. Carlo started writing short poems in a notebook labeled Secret. Jojo demanded pancakes 3 times in a row and declared himself the king of breakfast. Even baby May started babbling in what sounded like a mashup of English and Tagalog, and Ethan, he was learning to pause, to listen, to let joy in, even on days when the laundry never ended, and the floor stayed sticky. One afternoon, Ruthie handed him a folder. Inside, a form. Adoption information. Typed. "You don't have to fill it out now," she said. "Or ever." He looked at her, heart full, voice steady. "I already did." She stared. "You... when?" "The night you asked." Ruthie pressed her lips together, then rushed forward, arms tight around his waist. "I've been waiting to be someone's yes for a long time." Ethan held her close. "You always were." On a quiet Saturday morning, a package arrived. Not for Ethan, not for Mila, but for Ruthie. She found it resting on the porch. Brown paper, hand-addressed, tied with a red string. No return address. Just her name. Her old name. She froze. Lucia watched from the window, holding baby May. Ethan came out slowly. "Everything okay?" Ruthie didn't speak. She just walked inside, placed the package on the kitchen table, and stared at it. No one touched it. Not until later that night, when the house had stilled and the hum of the fridge was the only sound. She sat down, Mila at her side, Ethan across from her, and she opened it. Inside, a letter, a necklace, and a photograph. Her mother's handwriting, a small gold locket, a picture of a younger Ruthie with 2 people she hadn't spoken to in years. The letter read, "I'm sorry. I didn't know how to love you the way you needed. I thought I was doing the best I could. But I see now. You were doing better. You always were. If you found someone who sees you, keep them. Don't be afraid to belong. Love." "Mom." Ruthie didn't cry. She just folded the letter, placed it back in the box, and whispered, "I forgive you." Ethan didn't move. He just reached across the table, palm up. Ruthie placed her hand in his. No explanation, just connection. Later that evening, Ethan found Mila folding laundry in the living room. "You ever think about how strange it all is?" he asked. Mila looked up. "How people walk in. Strangers. But stay and become the only home that matters." She smiled. "I think about it every day." Ethan sat beside her, handing her a sock. "I keep thinking about that day you showed up at my door, with 7 kids, a bag of clothes, and hope in your eyes, like it had nowhere else to go." She laughed softly. "I was terrified," he nodded. "Me too." Then paused. "But I think I'd live that day 1,000 times just to find this one." The next morning, Ruthie wore the locket, not as a weight, but as a reminder of what she'd come from and who she'd chosen to be. And when Ethan saw her walking down the stairs, head high, eyes steady, he knew. Healing wasn't loud. It was quiet, and it happened one morning at a time. Out on the porch, the marigolds were blooming, bright, impossible gold. Jojo poked one and shouted, It's alive! Lucia rolled her eyes. That's how plants work. Ethan sat on the new bench, bigger, sturdier, with carved initials down the side. E+M+7. Mila handed him coffee and sat down beside him. The morning light caught her face. "What now?" she asked softly. Ethan looked around, at the laughter, the color, the warmth, and he smiled. "We keep going." It was a Sunday morning when everything slowed down, just enough to feel it. The kids were still in pajamas, syrup bottles stood half empty on the table, and Jojo had just declared himself king of pancakes after flipping one without a spatula. Lucia tried not to laugh. Even Ruthie cracked a smile. Mila wore a soft gray sweater, her hair pinned up loosely, as she moved quietly around the kitchen, humming a lullaby Ethan didn't know, but loved anyway. It wasn't a big moment. It wasn't loud or dramatic. But Ethan looked around and realized this was it. Not the chaos, not the mess, the middle, the everyday, the home. Later that afternoon, Ethan took Tomas to a hardware store to help pick paint colors for the playroom. Tomas chose moon dust gray and dragon's flame red with zero hesitation. "Are you sure about these together?" Ethan laughed. Thomas grinned. "It's for battle and dreams." Ethan nodded. "Perfect." At the counter, Thomas looked up and asked, "Are you going to marry Mom?" The cashier froze mid-scan. Ethan blinked. What?" Thomas shrugged. "You already act like it. I just wondered if it was official or secret." On the drive home, Ethan's heart wouldn't stop pounding. Not from fear, from possibility. That night, when all the kids were tucked in, Ethan sat on the edge of the porch bench. Mila joined him a few minutes later. She had a mug of tea. He had a small velvet box in his hand. He didn't open it, just held it. She noticed. Quietly. "You okay?" He nodded, swallowed, then looked at her. "You changed everything." She smiled gently. "So did you. I never planned for this. Not the kids. Not the bench. Not us." Mila's eyes glistened. "Me neither." He held the box out, still closed. "I don't want this to be a transaction," he said. "Not a paper. Not a rescue." "It never was," she whispered. He opened the box. Inside, a simple gold ring. No diamond, no flourish. Just real. "Mila," he said, voice trembling, "will you marry me? Not as a way to stay, but as a way to never leave." She stared at him, then reached out, took his hand, and whispered, "I already did." They didn't tell the kids until the next morning. Jojo ran in circles, chanting, "Wedding, wedding!" Bee cried because she didn't have shoes with glitter. Lucia began writing vows for everyone, including baby May. And Ruthie? She looked at Ethan and whispered, "I knew you'd be our always." The wedding wasn't big. In fact, it barely counted as a wedding by most standards. There was no church aisle, no choir, no towering cake. But what they had was real. Lucia took charge of decorations. She turned the backyard into something soft and whimsical, with string lights borrowed from neighbors and paper lanterns she'd painted by hand. Jojo appointed himself flower boy, launching petals in every direction like confetti. Bee insisted on glittering the sidewalk chalk hearts Ruthie drew on the patio. Ruthie found an old record player at a thrift shop, and on the morning of the wedding, she placed a vintage vinyl of soft jazz on the turntable and let the crackling melody pour into the yard like sunlight. And the dress? It wasn't new. It was stitched together from pieces of Mila's mother's scarf, a white summer dress she once wore in Manila, and lace given to her by the elderly neighbor next door, who called her Princesa. She looked like a memory walking into the present. Ethan wore his late father's tie, the same one he found in the attic 3 days before. He hadn't worn a tie in years, but this time it felt like armor and blessing all at once. The ceremony was small, just the kids, a few neighbors, the breeze. Ethan held Mila's hands under the makeshift archway, built from 2 ladders and garden string. Ruthie stood beside them, holding the bouquet like it might float away. Ethan looked at Mila and said softly, "You didn't just walk into my home, you brought one with you." Mila's voice trembled. "You didn't just rescue me, you chose me, and I've never felt more seen. They didn't need a pastor. They didn't need vows from a book. They had truth, and that was enough." After the ceremony, Jojo declared himself Mayor of Love and passed out napkins folded into hearts. Lucia played the same jazz record again. Bea fell asleep on Mila's lap before cake was even served. Thomas ate 3 slices and claimed it was for growth. And Ethan? He just watched his family stretch into something solid. Watched Mila hold May like she'd always belonged. Watched Ruthie lean against Lucia's shoulder, both girls wrapped in the warmth of being chosen. That night, after everyone was in bed, Ethan and Mila sat under the string lights, bare feet touching. "I didn't know love could be built," he whispered. "I thought it had to just find you." Mila leaned her head against his. "Sometimes it does. But the good kind? It grows. In dirt and dishes. In missed flights and messy pancakes." He looked at her. "What now?" She smiled. "Now we just keep showing up. For each other. For them. For all of it." And with the softest wind carrying the laughter of their children into the stars, they sat there, not as a mail-order bride and a lonely janitor, but as 2 people who made a miracle out of what everyone else overlooked. It was a Thursday when the papers arrived. Plain manila envelope. No fancy markings. Just one word handwritten across the front in black ink. Finalization. Ethan stared at it for a long time before opening it. Mila was at the sink, washing bottles. Lucia was upstairs helping Bea with math flashcards. Ruthie was playing the piano softly. Notes she'd written herself. Chords that sounded like they were born from hope. Ethan sat at the kitchen table and opened the envelope. Inside, the finalized. Adoption documents, signed, sealed, official, Ruthie Carter, Jojo Carter, Lucia Carter, Bea Carter, Carlo Carter, Thomas Carter, May Carter. All of them. Theirs. He pressed his palm over the pages like they were sacred. Because they were. When Mila walked over and saw the tears in his eyes, she didn't ask. She just sat beside him and leaned into his shoulder. "I didn't think we'd ever have this," she whispered. "Me neither." "Do they know?" He shook his head. Not yet. Mila smiled. Let's tell them the right way. That evening, the kids gathered in the living room for what they thought was movie night. Popcorn, blankets. Everyone crammed onto the big couch. Ethan stood in front of them, a folder in his hands. Ruthie furrowed her brow. We're not watching a documentary, are we? Everyone groaned. Ethan laughed. Nope, just something better. He opened the folder, held up the first paper. Ruthie Carter, he read aloud. That's official now. Her eyes widened. What? He passed her the paper. Her hands trembled. One by one, he called their names, each followed by the word Carter. Lucia gasped. Jojo screamed. Carlo cried. Bea whispered, Am I really yours now? Tomas clapped without fully understanding, and Baby May babbled at the sight of all the papers. Ethan stood there, full heart and teary eyes. You've always been ours, he said. This just makes it legal. They tackled him, like a tidal wave of limbs and love. Even Ruthie, who normally held herself back, threw her arms around his neck and whispered, Thank you for picking us back. Mila watched from the couch, a tear slipping down her cheek, her hand resting on her heart. She knew this day would come, but she didn't expect how big it would feel. How right. Later, when the house settled and the popcorn bowls were empty, Mila and Ethan stood side by side at the kitchen sink. No one ever picked me before either, she said softly. Ethan dried a plate, looked at her. Well, he said, I think we picked each other. She nodded, and for the first time in her life, Mila believed not just in survival or in starting over, but in permanence. Not because of paperwork, but because of the way Ethan looked at their children, the way they looked back, like home had been waiting for them all along. Autumn arrived softly that year. The leaves in their neighborhood painted the streets in amber, russet, and gold. The mornings turned crisp, and the laughter inside the Carter house stayed warm. The porch, rebuilt, weathered now, held a groove where Jojo always sat with his comic books. The marigolds had gone, but a new vine bloomed up the railing. Ruthie started journaling again, this time not to escape the past, but to celebrate the now. And one Saturday morning, Ethan found a letter addressed to the Carter family in the mailbox. No stamp. No sender. Just a folded envelope with 7 little stars drawn across the seal. He brought it inside and read it out loud. The kids around the kitchen table. Mila by his side. To the family that became one. I don't know if you'll remember me. My name is Angela. I was the translator on Mila's first letter, the one she sent from her mother's hospital room. She said she was going to a strange place, to marry a man who lived with too much silence. I didn't think it would work, but I was wrong. Today, I passed by your house on my way through town. I saw the porch lights, the drawings in the windows, the wedding arch still standing, and I just wanted to say, thank you for proving people wrong. Thank you for choosing each other, again and again. Some people search their whole lives for what you have. Some people never know it's even possible. But your house? It glows. You turned love into something living, and the world is better because of it. A stranger who believes in second chances. Now, when Ethan looked up, everyone was quiet. Lucia wiped her eyes. Ruthie smiled behind her hand. Jojo leaned in and whispered, "Is that from an angel?" Mila reached for his hand beneath the table. Ethan didn't speak. He just stood, walked to the front porch, and turned on the light, even though it was morning. Even though they were all home. Because sometimes a light isn't just for seeing. It's a way of saying, if you're lost, we're still here. If you're scared, we stayed. If you're ready to be loved, there's room. That night, after bedtime stories and blanket wars, after Ruthie added a new page to her journal titled Belonging, and after Mila whispered goodnight, husband, into Ethan's chest, he stepped onto the porch one last time. The stars were out. The bench creaked, and the porch light, it stayed on, just in case someone else needed a reminder that love, real love, doesn't come perfect. It just comes willing, and that's always enough.